Now, right as soon as we thought this saga is over, Francis has agreed to terms with the PFL. ONE FC, we walked away. Bellator didn't even put in a bid. He's going to PFL. UFC comes back in the conversation in the bottom of the ninth with a very, as far as I can tell, very clear ploy to get Francis back into the UFC. One last shot, demonstrating that business is not personal, and we can go through a very, very detailed examination of the strategy implemented by Hunter and Dana that was so smart. So smart. Doesn't mean they're going to end up getting him, but brilliant. And I will lay out exactly what I believe that they did here. And then we'll talk about where I think Francis should go if that is in any way unclear, which it shouldn't be, given that I did a video called Francis, Apologize to UFC. Just call him and say you're sorry. Call him and say you're sorry. There is absolutely no reason for you to be doing anything other than that. The UFC wants you. If they say they don't want you, they're just saying that because you didn't accept their offer. They want you. Of course they want you. Of course they do. And this new news article proves that. And how the UFC got back in the mix is brilliant. All right, so we're going to talk about all of that. If you don't mind subscribing to the channel, I would appreciate that very much. We cruised right through 110,000 yesterday. I appreciate you guys very much. We got to 110,136. So we just went whoop. And that is because you guys are genuinely good people and you subscribe to channels that you watch just like I do. I appreciate you guys. I subscribe to 1 million channels. I just subscribe to all the channels that I watch. And I would appreciate it if you guys did that with my channel if you watch my content. All right, so here is the deal. What are we talking about? How did they get back in the mix? Bam. Now, this video is brought to you by DraftKings, an incredible sponsor with an incredible CEO who I know personally. I've known Jason Robbins for a very long time. He is a gentleman. He's built an incredible system, an incredible company, and I'm proud to be doing this ad. So let's talk about DraftKings. Now, I've been using DraftKings lately. Their interface is very clean. The process is easy. The payouts are simple. I would highly suggest you guys try it if you haven't yet. And as usual, you have promotions for new customers. So when new customers bet $5 on any pre-fight money line wager on DraftKings, new customers will receive $150 in bonus bets if their bet hits. And if you're wondering what you can use the $150 in bonus bets on, try DraftKings UFC same fight parlays, where you can combine multiple bets from the same fight into one big bet for a shot at an even bigger payout. If mobile sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still get in on the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy, where they offer cash prize contests for nearly every sport. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use promo code FIRE. You bet $5 on any pre-fight moneyline wager and get $150 in bonus bets if your bet hits. That's promo code FIRE only at DraftKings Sportsbook. This is how they did it, okay? So UFC in the bottom of the ninth, after already having said we're out of the Francis business, bottom of the ninth, Jon Jones, they put this out. Jon Jones says Stipe fight likely to be his last unless Francis Ngannou returns to UFC. Now I'm going to go through this article with you guys, and then we're going to go back through exactly what the UFC did here, the strategy that was implemented, so we can really identify what to me appears to be an incredibly well thought out, brilliant negotiating strategy, right? You can't ever make a person take a deal. You can't. Okay, that is not a thing you can do. You can put an offer out there, and then you can try to set the table as well as you possibly can to get them to accept the deal. And unless I am drastically overthinking this, this is exactly what the UFC did. Okay, so we don't need to go through a huge amount of detail on the Jon Jones stuff other than this. So Jon Jones confirms his potential heavyweight title defense against former champion Stipe Miocic will probably be his last fight. That is, unless another former champion can somehow make his return to UFC. After winning the Jones said beating Miocic would be enough to cement his legacy forever and give him enough to call it a career. I feel like the Stipe fight will be plenty for me. I really don't feel like I have much to prove after beating Stipe. I've been in the game long enough, and in fighter years, I'm an old guy. So, I mean, listen, dude, would you want to fight? Would you want to fight these other guys? And I'm not like, it's about risk versus reward, right? Pavlovich, huge risk, and not people outside of the hardcore community really even know who he is yet, right? Tom Aspinall is bigger, but not that much bigger, right? So I think Jon Jones is basically stating, the obvious, which is he has nothing to prove against younger guys. But again, the UFC already said that they're not in the Francis business. Why would he put this statement out right now? Okay, so let me finish reading this and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so Jones is not slamming the door on a deadbolt on his career completely. When asked if there would be another fight that would keep him around a bit, the 35-year-old said, if the current free agent and former heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou somehow returns to the UFC, he would certainly entertain a lucrative matchup before riding off into the sunset. I do believe that Francis Ngannou fight would be worth entertaining and not retiring, Jones explained. I think a Francis fight would come with some serious revenue, and that would make it worth my while. Francis is a former champion. He's a pretty darn popular guy, and across the world, it would bring in a lot of money, and for that, I would be willing to come back. Okay, so here are a couple things that you don't know. So during the negotiation with Francis's team, early on throughout this whole thing, before free agency and all that, everything was about the Jon Jones fight. Everything was that Francis's team wanted the Jon Jones fight. They wanted like contractual guarantees around the Jon Jones fight. Now, I will certainly say, I don't know how you can do a contractual guarantee to fight a specific guy when you can't get that guy to contractually guarantee that he will fight your guy. You know what I mean? So I don't know. From a strategy standpoint, it makes it challenging because it's like, okay, well, we don't want any of these fights. We want the Jon Jones fight. And it's like, all right, well, we would love to give that to you, but Jon Jones is not an employee of our company. He's an independent contractor. I don't know how we can we can't get him to guarantee in writing that he'll be the next fighter, the one after, whatever. But bottom line is they wanted that Jon Jones fight bad. Now, the UFC also wants that fight bad for obvious reasons. It's a huge fight. So getting Jon Jones to put this statement out right now is like, here's something we can offer you in addition to what we had offered you before. Because guess what? Who was the champion when Francis made the decision to go into free agency? Not Jon Jones. Not Jon Jones. It was Francis. Okay? It was Francis. So Francis goes into free agency. He's stripped of the belt. Jon Jones wins the title. And that's when Dana had already been like, look, we're out of the Francis business. Now, you get to the point right now where Francis has supposedly agreed to terms with the PFL. He's gone to the ONE FC conversation just like, yeah, I've already agreed to terms and yada, yada, yada. And so when that hits the media, and then you get this right here, Jon Jones in the media, hey, this is a really lucrative fight. I would hang around if Francis was coming back. If look, I tend to be conspiratorial for sure, but I know for 1,000% sure that the UFC uses the media in many cases in these negotiations. I have a hard time believing that they are uninvolved in this right here. And here's what it actually means. Why Jon would put this out right now. It means we're still interested. Your offer is still on the table. And why this whole thing is so brilliant, if you really play it out, right? So they put their best and final offer in front of Francis. He doesn't take it. Okay. At the time, Francis thinks that he's negotiating the UFC contract against a potential Tyson Fury fight or whatever else. Again, I've talked extensively about this on the channel, and I have been very critical of how Francis handled this because, the idea that the Tyson Fury fight was not real is absurd because in April of 2022, he's in Wembley Stadium in the ring with Tyson Fury, arms around each other like, we're going to get this fight done. The problem is that Francis, for whatever reason, just thought he could do it on his own. And it's like, do you think these things are just magically happening around you? Why are you at this fight? Did you just come up with that on your own? You just flew out here? Did you talk to Tyson Fury? Did you talk to Tyson Fury's people? Did you know what I mean? It's like, these things are not just happening around you. There's people who are working on this. And then so once you go off on your own, that's the moment where realistically getting a boxing fight becomes an extraordinarily huge long shot. But nonetheless, whatever his idea of what was going to happen was, when he's first in free agency, he thinks he's negotiating against the UFC offer against boxing. So Dana's position, he takes the UFC's offer completely off the board. We're done with Francis. I can tell you right now, we will never have him back in the octagon. Now, do you think that Dana would really not take Francis back if he said that he would take that offer? Of course he would. Because here's the thing. This is not personal for these guys. Unless Francis did something where he overtly insulted these guys, right? Which he didn't. He just didn't take their deal. Okay? He hasn't gone to war with Dana in a way where it's personal. He's just made a decision that I would say in hindsight was not the correct one, right? Because now this thing, it's a series of incorrect decisions, at least thus far. Who knows? But as of this moment, I mean, do I need to say that signing with the PFL is not the right move? I mean, do I actually have to say that? You know, and I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to sabotage their deal. I'm not trying to do whatever. It's just like, it's a common sense, dude. It's common sense. Think about this. Just actually think about it, right? I talked to the bad guy yesterday about this, and he even was like illuminating this in a way that I hadn't even really thought about, which is like, dude, there's only one game in town that has the money to be able to pay guys like this. And I mean, and that's obvious. But in terms of like the pay-per-view game and putting on specific events, and this is me also correlating this to like the ONE FC financials. It's like, dude, if you pay a guy $10 million, right, for an event, and you bring in $5 million, and that's consistent with what you have brought in your best case scenarios, dude, you have to explain yourself to your investors. And they're like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? You know? And like PFL, they've never put on a pay-per-view before. So if they've made an offer that's equivalent to the UFC, what you are likely to run into is Francis actually not fighting. And so once I thought about it through that lens, I put it back to 2020. I'm like, yeah, dude, think about, you know, this is what I would say to Francis. Think about this. Just think about the following, okay? If Conor, like, why do you, like, how many times did Conor McGregor, actually, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm on a huge tangent. Let me go back to what Dana White did. Sorry. I'll come back to this. So Dana pulls himself off the table. Why does he do that? He does that because now Francis is going to go around and he's going to entertain all of these offers. Now, how are you going to determine what you offer Francis if you're ONE FC, PFL, or Bellator? Right? Where are you coming up with your numbers? Is it because, like, Francis comes in, he's like, I want $5 billion. You're all fucking, hey, man, we better get close to $5 billion. Of course not. Absolutely not. You're going to come up with your offer based on what you're competing against. Okay? And so if you're PFL or you're ONE FC, you're any of these guys, you can just carve out the boxing thing and you're not even responsible for that. Right? You're not even responsible for that. I mean, what you could theoretically, I'm saying, you know, I'm doing the thing where I'm thinking while I'm talking. Okay, so, but like, take boxing off the table. Okay, as soon as Dana takes UFC off the table, you are not having to make an offer that is competitive with Dana's offer because they've pulled it off the table, right? And so what Dana's doing is he's driving the price down on Francis, trying to make it to where he will not see an offer that is significantly more lucrative or even realistically as lucrative as what they can offer. And if you are, even if it looks like it could be as lucrative as UFC, this is guaranteed money over here. This is there's no way to guarantee as much money in mixed martial arts as you could get in UFC. That's not possible. There is absolutely no way. There's not any way that you're going to be able to guarantee that amount of money because you're not going to be able to guarantee those fights even happen, that you're going to have an opponent, etc. The only thing that PFL could, and I'm literally thinking about this as I'm talking, if you bring boxing back into the conversation, and PFL says, we will set up a boxing match for you with one of these guys and we'll co-promote it. That's the only way that this makes sense. UFC says they won't do that. PFL says they will. Okay? That's possible. I mean, that is possible. And that could be the thing that is driving this decision as I'm talking this through. But nonetheless, all of that is fairy dust, dude. You have no idea if they're going to be able to. Hey, PFL guys, walk me through. When was the last time that you set up a huge boxing fight against, WBA, WBC, one of these big organization champion, or just any, when was the last time you did that? They're like, oh, we've never done that. Okay. All right. So you've never done that. No, we never done it, but we will this time. It's like, all right. Is the UFC going to do that for you? They're like, and Fred's like, no, I don't think they're going to do that. So they're like, but we will. And you're like, okay, it's great that you're saying that, but are you going to be able to deliver on that? Right. And so again, you're taking a tremendous risk going with PFL. I will stand by this right now. The correct play is to go back to UFC. It just is. It just is. That is the safest play. You're taking tremendous risk at this point. I mean, look, dude, every time I talk about Francis, I run into this one thing, which is that any stage of his career up until this free agency thing, everyone would have advised him against the decisions that he's made, and it ended up working out. Like, he was in a sand mine. Impossible that he gets to where he is, and he did it. So who knows, dude? Like, I mean, as this thing plays out, maybe he goes to PFL, and maybe the PFL guys are able to put together a boxing match for him. He ends up making a fortune. He ends up being the, heavyweight champion of the world in boxing, and everything that he's ever wanted comes true. It's possible. But this, to me, looks extraordinarily unlikely at this point. It just looks unlikely. I'm just talking about, and if you take boxing off the table, there's no conversation here. Like, just take boxing off there's no conversation. There is no conversation. The correct play, if you're going to be a mixed martial artist, is to sign with UFC, no question. And it's not even close. It's not even close. And so the reason why having Jon Jones come back into the mix right now and let him know, like, look, man, this thing is still on the table, is because if he's thinking through this thing logically, and it's like, how, emotions should never drive business decisions. So if you take emotions off the table and you just look at this objectively, and it's like, all right, so I'm going to go with a complete and total unknown, right? Now, you already did that. You came into this thing with, everything unknown. And how has that worked out? Right? You figured that, like, someone would just throw you a boxing match. That did not work. Like, that has not happened. You have a completely, this is the thing, dude. This shit's not a fucking game, dude. Like, this is not a game. You don't have that many years left. You have never made one of these big multi-million-dollar paydays, and you have one sitting right there. Your kids will be set for life. Your kids' will be set for life if you're smart. Or you could just completely roll the dice. Why? You know what I mean? Why? Why roll the dice at this point? And who on your team is fighting for you? Once PFL gets you under contract, I mean, do you I don't know, dude. I mean, look, dude. Jake Paul could sell pay-per-views. Maybe. I mean, honestly, like I said, a lot of times as I'm talking things through, that is how I get to my destination. And I will say that there is that side of it where it's like, Jake Paul is doing business with PFL. I have spoken to Jake Paul's boxing promotions company recently. Okay. They are not like PFL and MVP are not the same, right? They're not the same. So it does put you right next to Jake Paul, though, I guess. And Jake Paul, they just sold a shitload with Tommy Fury. Maybe you do a, Jake Paul, Tommy Fury, Tyson Fury, Francis Ngannou. But that, again, I mean, is that actually going to happen? You're putting all your eggs in a total unknown versus taking a $10 million payout to fight Jon Jones. $10 million. And if you win, you'll make another $4 or $5 million when you fight this guy or that guy. And it's like, I don't know, dude. I am a financially conservative person when it comes to this kind of thing. Like, I'm down to take risks. I'm an entrepreneur for sure. But when, I know enough about his finances to know that he hasn't had one of those big hit numbers yet. Okay? Like, once you have one, you've had one $8 million night. You've had one, even like a $5 million night. If you play it safe, at least you know you're a millionaire, that you could put that with a financial advisor and you could buy some rental properties, whatever, and you're good. When you've been making $600,000 per fight, I know you guys know this, but $600K before taxes, before you pay everyone out, that is not even remotely close to life-changing money. It's not even close. I have a really big pet peeve when it comes to athletes getting in a position to make all this money or making all this money and then coming out of it bankrupt in their, when they're older. And I'm not saying Francis would be bankrupt, but I don't know, dude. When Mike McDaniel, I remember he got the coordinator job with the Niners. And we talked, and I'm like, dude, if you ever get a head coaching job, I'll come work for you. And I was like, oh, what kind of job could I carve out? And honestly, the job that I thought of was, I was like, I would love to work with these young athletes. And my only goal would be to keep them out of trouble and make sure that never happens. It never happens, because it'd be so easy. It's like, dude, this guy's making $3 million a year. Is there some way that you can set up a program where they never even see this money, right? You figure out a percentage that doesn't even get paid to them. It just goes zip and goes into some kind of long-term financial, planning account. Because they're 23 years old, 24. You cannot expect them to manage that. It's I'm talking nonsense. I hate this, dude. I hate it. I hate when guys come out of this stuff without money. I'm rooting for them. That is where this comes from. And if Francis ends up going with PFL and this doesn't work out, he doesn't get a boxing match, which is incredibly, I would say likely, he could just go sign with, he could just apologize to Dana. He could go sign with UFC. He could fight Jon Jones inside the next 6 months. He'll get $10 million. And from there, yes, you'll be tied to UFC and they're very unlikely to do anything special for you, but you'll be a multi-millionaire permanently. And, I'm talking in circles now. But anyway, so what UFC did is they got, they went through to where there are no other options now. They know it's like PFL is the only game in town. And by the way, here's Jon Jones. The offer's still on the table. You could come back to UFC, compare the UFC offer to what PFL is going to give you, and that makes sense. Now, the only other thing I wanted to talk about here was like a bunch of, I haven't watched it yet, but a bunch of people said Guru did a video about Ariel and Francis's team leading him astray due to their negative feelings towards the UFC. I don't disagree with that for sure. I don't know how much influence Ariel has had. I don't know how, but I will say certainly that, his team wanted to beat UFC. They wanted to beat them and they wanted to do the Tyson Fury fight. But this is the thing. Francis has been on his own since September. He's been his own man. And also, it's like his team was not driving the ship beforehand. Francis is the one driving the ship. Francis doesn't want extensions in his contract. Francis wants to do fighter healthcare. You think anyone on his team is going like, oh yeah, dude, the UFC is really likely to give fighter healthcare, to restructure the entire way that they do business and make everybody a W-2 employee as opposed to a 1099 independent contractor so they can do health insurance through the company. Like, of course, these are all Francis things. Right? And all of it, and listen, dude, like I'm not throwing a rock at a guy who tried to use his leverage position to get health care for fighters. I am not doing that. I am only saying that the board seat thing with ONE FC, ludicrous. Honestly, asking for fighter health care, ludicrous. It was never going to happen. These things were never, ever, 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 ever going to happen. How on earth is Francis going to serve on a board of directors, dude? It just means he's asking for things he doesn't even understand. And so, look, hey, I don't want any extensions in my contract. That's not that unreasonable, but the UFC, they're like, this is boilerplate. Everyone has extensions in their contract. There are no exceptions to this rule. 100% of the fighters that we have these same extensions in the contract. All of them, 100% of them. There is no one who does not have a champ clause. There's no one who does not have an injury one. Now, anyone who knows UFC contracts well will tell you that there are some extremely weird and unreasonable extensions that are in their contracts. Like, well, I don't know about the most recent ones, but certainly all of the ones kind of and they might still be in there, but like every time that a person fights in one of those grappling matches, as an example, right? They do like some external grappling match that extends their contract by 6 months. Now, here's the rub though. Sunset clauses supersede everything. The sunset clause is superseding. It doesn't matter. Extensions, blah, blah, blah. It's irrelevant. That 5-year sunset clause is the ultimate legal language that supersedes every other thing. And those are new, like we've been talking about. Changes the game. But this whole thing with Francis, listen, like you have two people that have gone independent right now. Nate Diaz, Francis. Thus far, the Francis experiment, it's like, geez, man, you should have just signed with UFC. Nate Diaz, he is going to use his own promotions company, and he's co-promoting with MVP, and they're going to do a boxing match in August, and he's probably going to make a lot of money. So it's not like everyone should just sign with UFC no matter what, but like, I don't know. I'm talking in circles. This is probably enough. I love you guys, and I appreciate the support. Subscribe to the channel. Peace.